Hey guys, it's Michelle, and I'm here to talk about my top 15 books of 2015. Coming in at number 15 is Kitchens of the Great Midwest by J. Ryan Stradall. This is the story of the life of an amazing chef, a very atypical life, and it's just fascinating to read. And because each chapter comes from a different person's point of view, you're not only getting the life of the chef Eva, but you are also getting all of their stories as well. And the way the stories were knitted together was just brilliant, and I absolutely loved the way this was written. Coming in at number 14 is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover, and she is the queen of new adult romance for me. And of course this was a new adult romance, and it was very angsty and very steamy. I love how the angst in her books is always plausible, reason for the angst, and this was no exception. It was funny, it was heartbreaking at times. Did I mention it was steamy? Because it was. Number 13 is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is a sci-fi novel. It's set in space on a ship that makes wormholes, but that is definitely not the important thing in the story. The important thing is that each character on the ship, each crew member, is struggling with something or going on some kind of personal journey, and it's just amazing how she's able to draw those stories out in a fashion that is so interesting and never boring. Her characters are crystal clear, and her dialogue is just spot on. I guarantee you, every time she expected me to roll my eyes, I did. Every time she expected me to laugh, I did. Every time she expected me to sigh or, start to tear up, I guarantee you I did. She is just a master at writing dialogue, and I highly recommend this book. Coming in at number 12 is The Orinda by Joseph Boyden, and this is historical fiction set in Canada. It follows, in the 1600s no less, it follows a small Native American family. And they, of course, are part of a village, which is part of a bigger tribe, which is part of a bigger kind of co-op. And they have counterparts that they don't get along with that are also Native American. And to make things even more complicated, there are some French missionaries that have come to convert them and live amongst them. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it is very violent, but most of all, Joseph Boyden has really done his research and is historically accurate, and it just feels so genuine. It's amazing. So check it out if you're interested in historical fiction. Number 11 on my list is All American Boys. This has two authors, and they present different viewpoints of teenage boys that were somehow involved in a police brutality incident. Jason Reynolds writes one perspective, and Brendan Keeley writes the other perspective. This book, it's a great story. It's told very well. It's done very well. Both perspectives are strong throughout the book. Both characters have to go on this journey and kind of discover what they're about as a result of the incident that they're involved in. But the amazing thing about this is that it's not letting anyone off the hook on racism, and it really does a great job of opening the door to discussions about racism that don't necessarily have to be active racism. They can be passive racism, and it will really make you reflect about your beliefs and actions. And if I were a high school librarian, I would be trying to get this into the hands of every teenager that I could. Coming in at number 10 is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a story that takes place before, during, and after an epidemic that wipes out most of humanity. There's a very small percentage of humanity left, and civilization, of course, has very much crumbled. There's no electricity. It's just a very interesting take. It makes you ponder things like, if you knew you were eating the last orange you would ever eat, how would that affect you? What would you miss most about civilization? But humans are resilient, and this is not just a beatdown or a hopeless story. In fact, it's quite hopeful, and you're following a band of traveling musicians who want to keep performing arts alive, even, in this post-epidemic world. It is just so well written. Her tone is just spot on. It's just an amazing read, and I can't recommend it enough. Coming in at number 9 is The Illuminate by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is a remarkable story. It is told in the format of a report, but that's not the amazing thing. The amazing thing is the way they have formatted this so lovingly. I highly recommend reading this in a physical format versus an e-format. The cover, the dust jacket is this like transparency material. You can see that this is a report. It has redactions and annotations and highlights and stamping on it. The types of information included in the report are remarkable. There are photographs. There are, let's see what else we have. We have some instant messaging logs that were recorded. We have ASCII art coming from emails. We have information coming from the ship's artificial intelligence. This shows the trajectory of little tiny fighter ships and what their pilots are saying as it goes on. It is just phenomenal, the different formats that the information in this book is presented in, and it makes it, like I said, an experience more than just reading a novel. It is amazing, and it's a very big book, but it goes so quick it leaves you wanting more. But this is number 1 in a series, so there should be more to come, and I look forward to seeing what that's all about. All right. Number 8 on my list is The Enchanted by Renee Denfeld. This is set in a prison, and it has some magical realism. The main character that you follow is on death row, and he escapes through books. There's an interesting thing the author does with the naming of characters. Some characters have actual names, and some characters are just referred to as like the lady or the warden. And there's something going on with that that's meaningful in this book, and it's kind of a subtle thing to pick up on. But the main importance of this book is that it is just a sharp look at incarceration and its link to mental illness. And most of the characters in this book were exposed to some form of mental illness or suffer from mental illness themselves in some way. And this book just really made me think about that and how we do and don't address mental illness in North America. All right, coming up next is number 7, and that is Lakhan by John Scalzi. This is a sci-fi book about centering around a disease anyway. The disease is called Hayden's, and when you have Hayden's, your body is paralyzed, but your brain is 100% functional. So we're about 20 years after the disease first came into being, and there are many different ideas about how to treat it. Your main character is named Chris, and they are a rookie detective who just got their first job investigating Hayden's related diseases. That's interesting enough in itself, but Chris has Hayden's, and so it is super interesting the way this played out. It is very entertaining. The reading of it with the pacing and all of that reminded me of watching a Rush Hour movies, and I would love to see this translated into a movie at some point. Number 6 on the list is Skull Throne by Peter V. Brett, and this is the 4th book in an epic fantasy series. The first book, depending on where it was published, is sometimes called The Warded Man and sometimes called The Painted Man. And it's basically about the humans that live in this epic fantasy world. There are basically 2 factions. One is more of a traditional society with royalty and innkeepers and musicians and healers and all that kind of thing. And then there is a very non-traditional society that gets all of their honor based on fighting demons. Well, demons are a big thing in this world. They live underground, but at night they can come out on the surface and terrorize humans. They kind of mist into being. They suffered a huge defeat at the hands of the humans several generations back. But their strength is growing, their numbers are growing, and the balance is starting to tip. A few humans are trying to convince humans of this to get them back into the mode of dealing with demons. But it's very hard for humanity to let go of their squabbles, even when they might be facing, extinction at the hands of demons. So it's just this epic tale of political intrigue and trying to see how the humans are going to deal with the demon problem in the end. And again, this was book 4 out of 5 in this series. Phenomenal. Number 5 on my list is Nemesis Games by James S.A. Corey. This is actually 2 writers that write together. This is a sci-fi series. I consider it a space opera. It is just phenomenal. The characters are so well written. The political scene changes in every book, and it just always feels fresh, even though you've got these characters that you're so comfortable and familiar with, and I don't know how they pull it off, but the world feels so real when you're in it. This has just been turned into a sci-fi series that started in mid-December on the Sci-Fi Network, of course, and I thought it was spot on from what I can remember from when this series started, but this is book 5, and it was amazing. Maybe one of my favorite in the series so far. Number 4 on my list is Redeployment by Phil Clay. This is a collection of short stories that come from the perspective of different American personnel that were in Iraq, mainly revolving around the Marine Corps. You might get the perspective of a rookie. You might get the perspective of a sergeant that's more of a veteran. You might get the perspective of an officer or someone who's involved in, like, the paperwork. You might get the viewpoint of someone from artillery or someone who's involved in rebuilding Iraq. And it's just a fascinating glimpse. I learned so much about what goes on and what doesn't go on and what pretends to go on. It was just a very revealing look about the things in war that no one wants to talk about when they come back. And I just think it's a very important read. I think every American should read it. Especially if they have a say in whether or not we send troops into a country that we really don't understand the culture. And I just thought it was a phenomenal and meaningful book. And I loved it. There's a reason it won the National Book Award. Coming in at number 3 is a graphic novel series. It is Chew. The author is John Layman. The illustrator is Rob Giori. It's just a fun little graphic novel series. It's disgusting. It's based on your main character being able to taste food and tell the history of it. And unfortunately, that works with human parts as well. He's a detective, and so sometimes he's forced to do that. Oh my gosh, is it disgusting. But it is so funny, and it has relationships and everything else in it. And I just don't know how they pull it all together, but they do. And it's just fascinating. The art is spot on. It sets the perfect tone with the color palette and the way it's illustrated. And the pacing is just phenomenal. And every time I pick up a volume, I think, oh, well, it's going to go downhill. And it never does. Of course, I'm only on volume 3, but I think this is already up to like 11 or 12 volumes. So I have a lot to look forward to with this one. Number 2 on my list is another short story collection. Man, who would have thought? I hadn't read short stories since high school, I think. But this one is just fascinating to me. It's by David Eagleman. He is a neuroscientist. He has some amazing TED Talks. He has a series that's been aired on PBS television. He writes nonfiction books about the brain. And somehow he found time to write this collection of short stories about what the afterlife might be like. Some of them are hilarious. Some of them make you think, oh, please don't let that be what it's like. My ideas of what the afterlife was like was very narrow, and so this just kind of blew it wide open, and it's creative and fun and interesting, and I just absolutely loved it. It fit me to a T. Coming in at number 1 for 2015 is actually a trilogy that I can't believe I didn't read sooner because it is perfection. And that is the Mistborn Trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I love his writing style. The world building in this was phenomenal. The magic system was mind-blowingly awesome. The characters are amazing. The political intrigue is amazing. And this is just like, it's like a sandbox when you're reading. You know how the world works. You know who the players are. You know how the magic system works. And a twist will be introduced into the story. And you can think of like 2 or 3 ways that the story could go with it. And it's just so fun because you never know which one it's going to be until you keep reading. And it's just so fun to guess and keep going. And I just love that about this series. And this has to be the best ending to an epic fantasy series ever. It just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, no way. I never saw that coming. How do you even... That is brilliant. Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be topped. If it does, whatever it is, I will be talking about nonstop on my channel. I guarantee you that. So those were my top 15 books of 2015. What was your favorite? If you've made a video or a post or anything, please link it below. I would love to read it or watch it. Thank you so much for watching and happy reading.